month. This is our 6th month doing this. And so we want to thank Susanne for that. Today's focus is on art, the art of women or women artists. It seemed appropriate that today, or this month being Women's History Month, that we focus on women's art. Sadly, Susanne had to look high and low for women artists. I mean, she just couldn't find any, but that was my joke. And then she corrected it and said, actually, Claudia, the Crocker has a lot of women artists. I had to sift through a lot to get to this job. So, you know, she stepped on my line there. What we'll learn from Susanne's talk today is these women had grit, determination, and a belief in themselves, that they had a lot to offer the world of art. Even if the world didn't think that they had that much to offer, they were determined. There were so many wonderful women artists and so much art, as Susanne had said, that we could probably devote a whole nother month to women artists, and maybe we will. You know, it would be lovely to do that.
Claire?
So here is our mistress of many things, a docent at the Crocker Art Gallery, and a friend sublime for all of us. So hang on and let me share. I know it's here somewhere. Share my screen and start. Susanne, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. So, as you can see, we're going to start with well-behaved women seldom make history. And Claudia is absolutely right. These women departed from the conventions of their day, and they broke with precedent to depict their own stories. They wanted their own voices to be heard, and and in a way that they wanted to portray them. They pushed the boundaries that were expected of them, and they challenged the status quo. Their art is mesmerizing, but I think their stories are even more so, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So Claudia, let's do the first slide. We're going to go back to the 1600s, and we're going to start with Maria van Wuster Vic. And she was born near Delft in the Netherlands. Her father was a Dutch Reformed minister, as was her grandfather. And when she was quite young, her father took her to the studio of a still life painting master, Jan de Ham. And de Ham, Crocker does have a de Ham, and he was very well known for his still life paintings. And he took her on as a student, as she obviously showed herself to have some talent. And so early we fast forward a little bit, early to the mid 1600s, Maria moved to Amsterdam, where her studio was opposite the workshop of a fellow painter, and who was Willem van Alst. And van Alst courted her repeatedly, and she repeatedly refused his hand. And finally, he just stopped pursuing her because her devotion to painting was more important to her than settling down and having a family, which was the norm of the day.
Oh, sorry, Susanne.
That's okay. Maria remained single throughout her life, but she did raise a nephew who had been orphaned. In addition to being a talented painter, she was also a savvy businesswoman. She obtained the services of an agent in Amsterdam, which is very unusual at the time for a woman, and they marketed her pieces to the Germans. And among her many patrons were King Louis XIV of France, the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold, Augustus the Strong, and William III of England. So she sold 3 pieces to the King of Poland. But despite the fact that her skillfully executed paintings of flowers were sought out by the Dutch and other collectors, she was actually denied membership in the Painters Guild because, of course, women were not allowed to join. There were obviously few women professional artists during the 1600s, yet they were written about. but most of the time they were written about in the glowing terms by their married life, and if they had children and all the housewifey things that they did. But Van Oosterwijk devoted her life to painting rather than being a wife and mother, and she was a challenging subject for these writers, so they didn't really write her in glowing terms at all. She was brusque, harsh, mannish. She doesn't really look mannish to me. She's quite a lovely woman, but they were not very nice to her. So this particular piece was an homage to Oosterwijk's skill as a floral painter, and was done by Valerant Valerant, and he painted a portrait of her holding a palette, and in the other hand, a Bible. So what else Maria did was she taught her servant Gertie Peters to mix her paints, and then she also trained her as a painter. And after Maria died, Peters lived independently and was able to support herself as a painter. So let's go to the next slide. So this is Maria van Oosterwijk's Roses and Butterflies. In her own country, she was not considered a professional artist, despite the floral paintings and still lifes that were much sought after, and very large sums of money her paintings drew. And she was, as I said, she was collected by high-profile members of European royalty. In this particular painting, she uses these luminous colors. They're richly detailed, and they sometimes, she demonstrated the chiaroscuro technique. So it's that light and dark shadow. So the background is dark, but the lightness of the butterfly and the rose pop out. And she helped transform the genre of the floral still life to what it is now. And this is an exquisitely done piece. We've previously talked about the symbolic elements, and Maria's paintings reflect those themes that were commonly found in the Dutch still life in the 17th century, such as vanity and impermanence and the obligation to devote oneself to God. The symbols such as butterfly resting on the flower kind of draws the viewer in, because it's really the white spot in the painting, but it also was a symbol of Christ's resurrection, the white denoting innocence, and the red or the pinkish were martyrdom. So all these little things symbolize something. The leaves look like they're dying, which talked about the impermanence of life, and anything coming over the edge of a painting is usually also talking about that impermanence, that things can be changed at a moment's notice. So anyway, this is a lovely, lovely painting, and she was a master at doing this. Quite an independent woman. All right, let's jump ahead several hundred years, and we're going to go to one of California's favorite daughters, and that's E. Carleton Fortune. And Melissa, I put her in here for you because you asked me last month about, do women painters paint under pseudonyms? And yes, they do. And Effie, or Euphemia Carleton Fortune, painted under E. Carleton Fortune or E.C. Fortune. And she was a fabulous, considered an impressionist, but she actually went more beyond the impressionist to more than even the post-impressionist. And even though the female impressionists struggled to achieve those same achievements as their male counterparts, they still really weren't included as much as the man. And so they really weren't part of a popular artistic movement. So it was really almost impossible to get their work shown. As I mentioned, as an artist, she also went by gender neutral versions of her name. And the word feminism was coined around 1910. And as more women were pursuing careers and departing from the convention of being a wife and a mother, and getting into a field that was considered manly. Women's suffrage passed in California in 1911, and you'd think with all that going, the female artists would be welcomed, yet female artists were not considered desirable to galleries or colors. So when she went by these gender neutral names, she was able to sell and show more paintings, and she became very successful doing it under. So let's go to the next slides, Claudia. Fortune's career. Oh dear. Okay, well, we're going to just, obviously, I must not have sent you the right one. Okay, her career began in Northern California, where she was born, and many of Fortune's active painting years were spent in Monterey. She embodied the new woman. She was energetic, she was strong-willed and very assertive. She never married, she never had children, and she often rode her bicycle to find the perfect setting to paint plein air or outside air. The resulting landscapes were not delicate, they were not soft or feminine, but they were bold and vigorous, and they were often thought to be created by a man. In fact, that was the height of complimentary, as if your work was considered bold and vigorous and manly, that's what hers were. And unlike the women, a lot of her works featured women doing things, being fishermen, mending nets, out in the landscape, tending animals, picking apples. She doesn't see women as playthings for men, and she had a wicked sense of humor and was very outspoken, and even by male standards of the time. A reporter asked her what she found to be the most challenging aspect of painting, and she responded, "When the wind blows my easel over." So she didn't take crap from anyone, and throughout the 20s, she lived mostly in the Monterey area and painted there. But throughout the 20s, she lived and painted abroad for extended periods of time in St. Ives, England, and Saint-Tropez, France. And during that time, she painted a lot of harbor scenes. And this one is from Saint-Tropez, and it is called Wine Cargoes, but it's just this bold color. And when you can see any of her work up close, the brushstrokes are very quick and vigorous, and they have a lot of energy to them. And she's able to impart a lot of movement and action in her paintings. They're exquisite, and she was a master at this post-impressionist work. Let's go to the next slide, Claudia. There we go. She founded and directed the Monterey Guild. It was a group of skilled craftspeople, and under her direction, the Monterey Guild created original modern artworks and furnishings for churches. She was Catholic. She was very devout Catholic, and she did not like the way churches were being decorated. So at the time, the churches would find their interior decorations through catalogs, and most of it was very Victorian, kind of over the top, sentimental, sugary, lots of lace and polychrome statues, and everything kind of looked alike. So she wanted to do something that was simple and honest and strong. So her altarpieces on the left-hand side, they're beautiful, but they're clean. And this is actually from St. Rose Chapel in Sacramento, where she did the entire altarpieces from it.
Susanne, at St. Rose in Sacramento, and it's there today?
Yeah.
So that's St. Rose Lima, the cathedral then?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. There's a St. Rose also that's over by Southside Park, and I have to check on that. But thanks for asking, and I will check on that. So part of, you know, where people had thought, you know, about this, that she may have had some religious conversion. But as I said, she was devoutly Catholic all her life. But what happened was the Great Depression, and she realized her paintings weren't as cutting edge as they once were, And she knew that many people wouldn't be buying paintings in the bad economy. So she said churches are always going to need decorations. And as you can see, that's her bicycle that she rode around Monterey with all her art supplies. She was probably a very formidable woman. All right, let's jump to the next century, or actually the 1900s. There we go. Marian Post-Wolcott. She's best known for more than 9,000 photographs she produced for the Farm Security Administration from about 1938 to 1942. She was actually the first woman to be offered a full-time Farm Security Administration appointment as a photographer. And she was born in New Jersey, and her mom, Marian Post, was an ardent activist for progressive causes, including Margaret Sanger's, was the founder of Planned Parenthood. So she was early on seeped in a lot of activism. And before she became a government photographer, she was first a teacher. She moved to New York and then earned her living making photographs for magazines and newspapers.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you. Initially, she worked freelance and then as a staff photojournalist from 1937 to 38. And then she also then broke gender barriers by being in the newsroom darkroom. So now we can go to the next one. So I want you to take a look at there we go. My question to you is, can a photograph be both documentary evidence and art? So what do you think here on this one?
Definitely.
Yeah, so what do you think the story is telling you?
Oh, poverty.
Poverty? Why do you say that, Lil? What do you see?
Well, this little girl, is she carrying what, a bucket of water or something, and she doesn't look well dressed, and the little house there, I mean, you know, it's almost shanty-like. Everything looks poor.
Right. Okay. So basically, you take a look at this photo and it immediately tells the story. There are these small details that enhance what's going on. Do you think the photo would be different without the child?
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be as sad.
Wouldn't be as sad. Well, when she's
taking a lunch bucket to her dad.
Could be taking a lunch bucket to her dad. Where do you think this is? I know that it has the thing in it, but if you looked at this without looking at the title, where do you think this would be?
Didn't look at the title.
No,
It's coal. They have boxes of the coal is in the trains.
Coal in the trains, exactly. Looks like lots of coal.
Also, I think, but it's why she looks poor because of her posture. It's the way she's walking, the way she's tilting on the little girl.
Okay, there you go.
If she was standing straight and walking, that would be a totally different picture. It'd give a different image.
Yeah. Okay. Is that Diane? Is that you talking?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Well,
it looks like, to me, it looks like West Virginia or Pennsylvania coal mines, with ore coming through. This poor country.
You're right, it is West Virginia. And Wolcott covered thousands of miles for the FSA with her camera to document and publicize the need for federal assistance to those hardest hit areas from the Great Depression. Now, the FSA, and I'm sure you've heard about them, they were cousin to the WPA. They were they between 1935 and 1944, they were photographers that were under they called it the actual Farm Security Administration historical section, and they produced 77,000 photographic prints, and all those prints are available for public viewing at the National Archives. So you could actually go and ask to see those. They oversaw a lot of numerous programs during the Great Depression, and the historical section was directed by Roy Stryker, who developed this documentary photography team. He hired 10 individuals two of those were women. One was Marian Post-Wolcott, and the other was Dorothea Lange, who we are also familiar with. Dorothea went mostly to the western states in California, and Marian Post did mostly the South, the Midwest, the Midwest states, West Virginia, and in that area. So they basically documented the American cultural landscape during that time. And as I say, the photograph is absolutely phenomenal. It tells the entire story right there. Wolcott also contributed about 120 color photographs to the FSA when Kodak provided early samples of Kodachrome film to the staff to experiment with. And she produced an extraordinary number of images, and her and also what she did that was important was that she challenged the many social mores about the propriety of young women living away from family home and traveling on their own. So she changed that look. So her artistry and perseverance have helped inspire many articles and books and exhibitions. All right, let's go to our next one.
Well, Susanne, before we
No,
move
I'm
on,
sorry. Please, anyone jump in and ask questions as we're going through this, because I am moving rather quickly.
well, I just find it fascinating that the government of the time documented the poverty that the nation was going through in the Depression. You know, and of course, photography or, you know, journalists or whatever weren't as prevalent as they are today. But I just find it fascinating that they wanted to document this horrible time in American history. I think there's a great honesty in that and a great candor to that.
That's a great observation, Claudia. And yes, it was very far-reaching and forward-thinking of them to do this, because it would have been very easy for them to ignore. But when you have a third of the country out of work, and you can't hide from it. So it was pretty amazing. These programs were set up by, you know, FDR in all those New Deal agencies, and this was one of them. It wasn't just giving public works to do artwork. A lot of the murals that we see, Diego Rivera, a lot of, you know, they were very well known. But the photographs, to go about and photograph, you're absolutely right. It was, I think it was thinking far ahead and documenting that. And
I wonder if it wasn't a way for FDR to defend his social programs to people who were really critical of him and them.
Oh, I'm sure you're right, Judy. I mean, I'm sure it was a way for him to market his legislation. Speaks to me of faith that we were going to come out of it, quite frankly.
yeah, exactly. All right, let's move on to the next. All right, Corita Kent. Frances Elizabeth, the woman who would become Sister Corita Kent, was born in 1918. She was a nun, she was an artist, and she was an activist for social justice. And Kent, who chose the name Mary Corita when she took her vows to the church, was an extraordinary artist whose pop art blurred the line between reverence and the commonplace. She reached her greatest fame in the 1960s, Los Angeles, during a time of the social unrest. And at the end of the decade, she wound up actually leaving the church. She relinquished her vows. But let's go back to the very beginning. At 18, she entered the religious order of Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. She received her bachelor's at the Immaculate Heart College and her master's at USC. And she learns silk screening. She becomes enamored with that. And that, as she's completing her master's degree, and that basically sets her on the path for her artwork. She begins teaching in and then heading up the art department at the Immaculate Heart College. And what's so fascinating to me is that these classes were an avant-garde mecca for prominent groundbreaking artists and other inventors, such as Alfred Hitchcock, John Cage, Saul Bass, Buckminster Fuller, Charles and Ray Eames. They took classes from her. So let's go to the next slide, Claudia. Here we go. In 1962, Corita was in her 40s, and she went to see Andy Warhol's breakthrough exhibition on soup cans. And later she recalled that coming home, you saw everything like Andy Warhol. It was kind of a seminal moment for her in transforming her from a convent school teacher into an artist who became known as the pop art nun. And her works evolved from figurative and religious to incorporating advertising images and slogans. They included popular song lyrics, biblical verses, and literature such as Winnie the Pooh and E.E. Cumming, who was one of Kent's earliest and strongest influences. She used everyday consumer items like Warhol, and she wanted to bring her religion to a familiar product that people saw and used every day. And as she moved into the 60s and in the 70s, her work became more increasingly political, urging viewers to consider poverty and racism and injustice. Now, she left the order in 1968 and she moved to Boston. And after she left, her work kind of evolved into a more sparser, introspective style. She was living in a new environment. It was a secular life, and she had started her first battle with cancer during that time. In 1983, she was asked to design a postage stamp, which you can see on the right-hand side. After several years in limbo, the design is issued in 1985, I believe, and the unveiling takes place on the Love Boat. And Corita was so furious, she refused to attend, saying that was not the kind of love she had in mind. She wanted the stamp to be unveiled at the United Nations. This is probably, that love stamp is probably one of her most well-known artworks. And the US Postal Service sold more than 700 million of the stamps. So it was a pretty good moneymaker for them.
So it's based on the art, on the with Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel song?
What's
Feeling
that?
Groovy?
Oh, so she could very well have. I mean, she used everything in her art, and there's probably not anything. I mean, there's probably something that you have had that some design that she probably was very influential in. She actually was asked to oversee a painting of the 170-foot high liquid natural gas tank for Boston's gas company at the waterfront in the rainbow colors. And I'm sorry I don't have a photo of it, but it was an expression of peace in the midst of the Vietnam War. And she was commissioned to do that. And it's still the largest copyrighted work of art today. She remained active in social causes until her death. And at that time, she created almost 800 seriographs or screens, silk screens, thousands of watercolors, and innumerable public and private commissions. And I got to tell you, this is so fascinating. Not once did she number any of the prints in a series, because she said not one is more important than the other. So any questions on Corita?
Well, I think we ought to do a campaign to have the love stamp re-released as a forever stamp. I mean, that's a wonderful design.
It is wonderful. And I think we all can kind of remember the 60s and maybe the 70s, and you could probably look her up and see a lot of different art that she did. She did a huge banner for the Vatican Pavilion at the World's Fair. And it was called, I think it was called Power. And it had all kinds of writing, quotes from it, from well-known people, the Bible. It was just a fascinating piece.
Susanne, this is Pam. Can I add something?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I remember the saying, if you can remember the 70s, you weren't there. So I just wanted to add that.
A bit of a blur, but
Suzanne,
Well, it depends. Maybe some of us were more into it.
Remember, I know quite a few of you on the call.
Okay, well, let's turn.
80s are particularly blurry for me.
I remember every moment of it. All
I'm
right,
not sure I want to.
let's turn to three extraordinary women from the same family. All right, Claudia, you can go to the next slide. All right, we're going to talk about Helen Hardin on the left, Pablita Velardi, her mother, in the middle, and then Marguerite Bagshaw, Helen's daughter and Pablita's granddaughter, and it's three generations of artists. And let's go to I'll talk about Pablita first. Pablita Velardi was born in the Santa Clara Pueblo. Now, we've talked about that when we did Pueblo dynasties on the pottery. And she was the first Native American woman to paint professionally. She was the first to produce a book. She was the first to paint a WPA mural. And she was the first to be honored by the French highest honor, the Palmes Académies. It's their highest cultural award. So after her mother's death, when she was 5, she was sent away, or she called it marooned, at St. Catherine's Indian School in Santa Fe. And she left behind the Pueblo where she was born and the life she knew. She returned home during the summers to help her father. And later she recalled, she picked up a piece of charcoal and then started drawing. But her father did not like her drawing. He regularly torched these because Santa Clara women were supposed to produce babies and pottery, not canvas. Now, we talked about Santa Clara, the different mesas, and the first mesa, the Santa Clara mesa, the women were potters, and that's what they did. They did not branch out into anything else, but so strong was her desire to draw and paint that she broke with tradition. So by the age of 14, she was the first female student admitted to the Santa Fe Indian School. And she came under the tutelage of Dorothy Dunn, who was a controversial art teacher. And she took her under her wing and encouraged her to portray scenes from her community. And she trained her to paint in a style that was known as flat painting. And on the left, it is one that the Crocker has, and it's a flat painting because it's characterized by flat fields of color, primary painted in opaque watercolors. There's heavy outlines, and then it has some dimension, but not a lot of dimension. And that was very typical of the style that she was taught in. And it was a style that she used her entire life. A lot of other artists moved away from it, but that style called to her, and she stayed with that style her entire life. She got more refined with it. This is a later piece, and more detailed with it, but still it retained that flat look. She also then shifted to creating her own pigments using ground up minerals and rocks, Elmer's glue, and water. And she used the traditional metate and mano, which was the stone tools that they grind corn on a lot, but you also can grind other things on it. And she called those her earth paintings. At 16, she was commissioned to paint a mural for the Chicago's World Fair, and she met Diego Rivera. And by 1939, the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration, installed her as the artist in residence in New Mexico's Bandelier National Monument. And she completed more than 70 murals and paintings, and they're there today. Her intimate knowledge and the artistic skills that she had proved they were integral in educating others about her people, and that she helped preserve the stories and the knowledge, and she strengthened the Pueblo cultural identity. At 24, she married Herbert Hardin, who was a UC graduate, and then her daughter Helen was born in 1943 in Albuquerque, and Helen followed in her mother's footsteps. So let's go to Helen, Claudia. Helen emerged in the 70s and 80s as a trailblazer for Native American women artists wishing to break from tradition. Her Tewa, they were called Tewa, the tribe, was a little standing spruce, Sasawie, and she signed all her paintings Sasawie. She also was born into the Santa Clara Pueblo community, but she also had a white father. So even though she was raised by her mother pretty much and her family at the Santa Clara Pueblo, she lived among the Anglo world for much of her life. She said she saw herself as Anglo socially and Indian in her art. When she was 6 years old, she won a first prize for a drawing. And when she was 9, she sold her works with her mother's works at the Gallup ceremonial events, Gallup, New Mexico. As I said, neither of the families accepted her because of her so-called half identity. And according to the laws and traditions of that time, Hardin was forbidden to partake in the traditions of her mother's culture by the Santa Clara Pueblo elder. She was not allowed to do ceremonial dances with her people. That was a very important part of a child's identity in Pueblo life, and many times she wasn't even allowed to attend them. So she moved to Albuquerque for high school, and then she went on to the University of New Mexico to study art, history, and anthropology. And in high school, she again broke barriers because she took a drafting class that was at that time only offered to boys. She bullied the teacher into allowing her to go. And at that point, Hardin was introduced to architecture and those forms and the tools and the very preciseness and process of it. And she used that in her work from then on. She had a one-woman show in 1962. And even though she followed in her mother's groundbreaking steps as an artist, her relationship with her mother became increasingly difficult as Hardin became more artistic and as she broke from her mother's traditional type painting. In fact, her mother said she didn't like her paintings, and so Hardin stopped painting. And she had a relationship with her high school boyfriend, and then several years later, she had a daughter, Marguerite Bagshaw, and and Margaret would also then become, come on to be a respected artist. Hardin said she had to sneak opportunities to paint because both her boyfriend and her mother disapproved. So after 4 years, she had had enough. She took her daughter and she moved to her father's home in Bogota, Colombia. She connected with him, and she wanted to distance herself from the Santa Clara Pueblo community and her mother's influence and escape Margaret's abusive father. She said that I awoke to the fact that I was 24 years old. I was locked into an unhappy relationship and I was not painting. I didn't know who I was or what I was. I was in search of personal freedom. I took Marguerite and I left the country. So away from those influences, she actually started to experiment. And when Helen returned to Albuquerque, she brought a new style and she combining abstractions of imagery from her community heritage with a personal approach to those historic motifs. And as we can see, she started she departed from that traditional flat style and beginning to work in more three-dimensional. She repeated these complex geometric forms that also, she said, were influenced by Cubism. And she was also influenced by the imagery she found in petroglyphs and the ancient potsherds that came out of a lot of the digs. She became well recognized for her use of bold, vibrant colors. And she had an affinity as she moved into into more of her mature work for iridescent paint and metallics, and they became her trademark. Now I want to talk really quickly about Changing Woman. This is the one we see here. And it's the first print in 23 copper-plated etchings. She loved etchings. It was very precise. It was detailed, and it's very challenging to do. And that appealed to her sense of control. This is, excuse me, Changing Woman is the first in the women's series. And you kind of can see her, I don't know, I call it quiet feminism, and it includes her own voice and her of her heritage. It looks, you know, it says that she has two faces, and you can see those if you look at it. There's one is as if looking at herself, and then the other is as if looking out at the world. And instead of being odds with each other, they're each other's teacher. And Helen said that a woman is always growing. She isn't the same at 40 as she was at 20. And she said there's something sad about a woman who can't change. So Claudia, let's go to the next one.
What did she die from? She died quite young.
Breast cancer.
She was 50.
She was 47, I think. She was in her 40s when she died. She died of breast cancer.
Yeah. It says
Oh, this
84.
Yeah, Claudia, you want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, I will do that, but she was only 50.
Oh, was she 50? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Her work continued to draw criticism from tribal members who expressed concern that her mythical figures too closely resembled sacred kachinas.
Oh.
Though Hardin said she always invented her own. She said, "This is my language, and this is how I'm going to talk." I thought she died at 41, but Claudia, you probably could be right. You probably can. She was very young when she died. And this is
all, dates on there.
Yeah, the date is on there. It's 84. She died in 84. She was born in 34.
43. She was born in 43.
Then there's a typo in here.
Yeah.
Then it's my typo.
Oh.
Okay, she died in she was born in 1943. So I will correct that for our next stop. Anyway, this is another one that's right now the Crocker has an exhibit called Helen Hardin Spirit Lines.
Oh.
And Changing Woman and this particular print are also in that exhibit, and it's stunning. The colors are bright, they're crisp. Her geometric pieces, they just, the more you look at it, the more you can see different figures, number of figures. And also I want to point out that Helen incorporated, as did her mom, incorporated a lot of the symbolism of the Southwest Native Indians. So you can see the jagged lines. Those are Kiva steps. The Kivas were a very sacred place, building for them, and they represent life, birth, life, and death. There's very edging that is thunder, lightning, or rain. Rain is very prominent. Water is very prominent for the Indians of the Southwest. Feathers, usually an eagle feather. So there's a lot of symbolism that she put in, but certainly unlike any of the work that was seen before. And I want to just touch briefly, when I go to the next one, we'll just talk about her daughter, Margaret. And Margaret's paintings were also like her mother's. They were vibrant, they were abstract, and they featured Native American iconography.
Iconography.
Yeah, thank you.
Iconography.
Yeah, and just like her mom, she also pushed beyond the limits of the previous generation to create an art recognizably her own. Sadly, she also died young. She was 50, I think 50. She died of brain cancer. So, but also a beautiful, beautiful artist and very symbolic, and quite vibrant and bold. Okay, any questions on these three ladies?
What was the the painting on it? Was it on, you said etching, or was it on wood, or
Which
canvas?
one? Which one?
Well, the middle one, you
mean Helen's?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
This one, goodness gracious, I should know what these were on. Hold on a sec.
It says on board, metallic.
Okay, so it's
acrylic
metallic
board.
on board. Thank you. And then the other one was a copper etching. Her first one, Changing Woman's copper etching. That's copper. And she did 23, and all 23, I believe, of those are in the Crocker show.
Oh, wow.
Great.
And then Margaret.
Show go, Suzanne.
It just it opened.
12?
Gosh, last month, Pam. No, I think it opened in November. It was supposed to close this month, but I think they've extended it to November.
Yeah, we open to the general public. If you're not a member, you can start going on April 8th. And there should be a few months, I believe. I don't remember the exact date, Suzanne, but if you go within at least the first month, but you can find it on the special exhibits on the website.
Yeah, I think it started last month, and I heard that it was supposed to go through May. And then I thought they said they were going to extend it, but I could be wrong. So at least we know it goes through May.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on those? So we can go to our next artist. Okay, our next one is also pushed the limits of her previous generation, and that was the ceramicist Elsa Ratti. And it was phenomenal. I mean, Claudia and I have talked about this particular photo anyway, because her work is so stunning and vibrant. But to me, her ceramics are mesmerizing. She kind of re-images familiar and utilitarian porcelain vessels into objects of geometric simplicity and beauty. And so early in her career, might we go to the next one, Claudia? She did ceramics that were inspired by China, by the Chinese. So she had this whole section on they call it faux. She called it faux Chinese, and they were inspired by the Celadon porcelains of the Song Dynasty of China. And the resulting works were these small. This is a very small piece, delicate, and they had little notches in the vessel rims, and kind of while these notches are shallow, they offer a soft flowing movement to the edges that shows the fragility of this porcelain. She experimented with glazes. She likened them to the porcelain skin. And she aimed to create combinations of forms and colors that she found ideal. So as she was experimenting with glazes, she also was experimenting with throwing thinner vessels and thinner rims. She, although she was born in New York, she lived and worked in Southern California for much of her adult life. In New York, when she was young, she took pottery lessons at the Greenwich House Pottery in New York. When she started at 7. And age 7. And what was interesting about the Greenwich House is that it was founded in 1902 to improve the living conditions among the predominantly immigrant population of the neighborhood. but it soon became a center of fine arts education and production. She then moved to Los Angeles. She went to the Chouinard Art Institute, which was very renowned, and it merged with the Los Angeles Conservatory of Music, and it's now the California Institute of Arts, or CalArts, is more commonly known. She was guided by her teachers to kind of let the clay create the shape of the vessel rather than drawing preconceived forms. So this emphasis on spontaneity was a principle that guided her throughout her entire life and generally impacted her later work. After she attended Chouinard, she joined Franciscan Ceramics, which makes tableware and tile products. And she worked in the tile department. She worked with a woman named Mary Blair, who was a concept artist from Walt Disney Studios. And they worked together to create 12 by 12 inch tiles for murals throughout Southern California and murals at Disneyland's Tomorrowland. Those unfortunately are not there anymore, but there is one, my understanding is one at the Jules Stein Eye Institute at UCLA that is still left from that. She worked there for 2 years. She had a car accident in 1968 that prompted her to leave the company. And part of it was she was in constant pain. So she had to find something that worked for her. That's why she went into her own, doing her own studio work. So we've mentioned her first evolution under those three groupings was the faux Chinese. And so let's go to the next one, Claudia, please. There we go.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, what happened was a simple mistake kind of caused her to cut too deeply into one of her rimmed edges. So she started re-examining her vessels. And so she was inspired by the streamlined forms of Art Deco buildings, and she began to cut deeper into the porcelain rims. And one of her friends said that they seem to capture the spinning motion of a potter's wheel, especially the two on the left. And they look like the swirling hems of dancers' dresses, like those of her mother, who was part of the Martha Graham Dance Company. And so what Ratty called them were, those notches were wings. And they kind of give a dynamic energy to what would normally be kind of a static pot or bowl. She moved into her third evolution, which is more of the bowl on the right, where she the porcelain vessels became bolder and bigger and thinner, and the notches deeper, and the porcelain glazes were matte, and the bases were more narrow and more experimental shapes. And Claudia, I'm sorry, if you can go back to her very first one where they had the three bottles.
Oh, sorry, Susanne jumped out.
It's touchy, isn't it?
It is touchy.
Yeah, there we go. That's kind of her third experiment or evolution. Those three, they were taller. She called them narrative installations. They're groupings of tall bottles and vases, and they were secured actually. They didn't move, and then she could place them on the walls and tables. So she kind of kept experimenting her whole life, and as you can see behind her, she was a fiend to glazes. She loved glazes, and she was constantly tinkering with them and working with them to get the kind of glaze that she wanted. And Patricia, you're a ceramicist, right? You do pots. How hard are glazes to do and get it right?
Very difficult.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Especially those matte ones, aren't they? To get that shine but not gloss.
And the smoothness. I know in college I did a glaze, and it ended up being red, which was amazing at that time because they didn't have a good red glaze. but they all knew that I didn't take good notes, so nobody could ever reduplicate it. You have to be very, very precise.
Oh my gosh. Well, those happy accidents are what, that's how Elsa Ratty got into her work.
Right, it's very precise on the glazes.
Exactly. Well, she, you know, basically her vessels they're no ornamentation. They're only simple, they're unadorned silhouettes, and they're less likely about the functionality, from the vase or the bowl or the bottle, and more about the geometric simplicity. And she said that the ceramics and porcelain in particular, which is very hard to work in, it disciplined and humbled her. And she always felt at the mercy of the material, the firing and the glaze. She, early in her career, she said she felt she needed to make the perfect piece, but later she learned to turn the accidents into moments of spontaneity, as we have seen. And then she said to let it fly. And that's what she called her pieces, let it fly. And this is also a show that the Crocker has that it's called The Edge of Elegance. And it opened this week, I believe. And this is the one, Pam, that closes in November.
Yeah, I posted the dates in the chat.
Oh, thank
all
you.
three.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I think you can watch it online, correct?
You can see, they do have some of the pieces, yes, online, and they have articles about it, and they have some photographs of it. So yes, I don't know if the curator has done a walkthrough of it and done a YouTube, you know, a video of it. Sometimes they will do those of the special exhibits, but we'll find out for you. Was that Diane?
Yeah.
That asked that? Okay.
Jan.
All right. Well,
Can
it was Janice. Sorry.
Suzanne, I'm sorry, can I say one more thing about the porcelain?
Absolutely.
Porcelain is a very slick clay. A lot of times they put grout in clay, sand, and like terracotta has a very heavy feel. It has a lot of sand that keeps the clay from separating and from falling. Porcelain doesn't have that. It's a very fine texture. So to get it thin is very difficult because it doesn't have anything to grip to itself. So if you can get it really thin, it's a very difficult clay to throw.
Well, that's probably why she said she felt at its mercy all the time.
So,
Suzanne, can I add something too?
Absolutely,
about,
Pam.
This is Pam. So somebody said, can I view this online? And at the Crocker, we're really trying to record, as Suzanne said, a lot of YouTube. But, you know, especially with this particular exhibit, look how rich those colors are online. It's unbelievable in person, as well as the spirit lines. They're just, you know, you can only get so much. If you can't have the opportunity to visit in person, this is a great second, but the colors are just so amazing.
I'd rather be there in person, but
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was opening to the public.
April 8th.
They just announced it, Jan. They just announced that they're going to be doing that.
Right.
Well, I want to honor our time because we have moved up to the hour and we still have our meditation to do. So I will leave it at this point.
oh no, Suzanne, that's okay. I'm good.
Yeah, well, there's there's one more. And I think a lot of you, if you're Sacramento residents, you will recognize this particular piece. I'll quickly go through. This is Elizabeth Catlett, and she enjoyed a successful career in arts at a time when Black women were effectively excluded from the field. She was known for her abstract work, but also she was specialized in statue. She was a fabulous carver, and she did fabulous statues. She was the grandchild of formerly enslaved families, and she was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Her father was a professor of mathematics at Tuskegee Institute, but he died several months before she was born. Her mother, also well-educated, worked as a truant officer in the Washington public schools. And From her grandmother, she heard firsthand accounts about the horrors of slavery, and from her mother, kind of the grim realities of life in the slums of the nation's capital. And the reason I bring this up is because those are the narratives that shaped her early awareness of the suffering and exploitation of the Black people in the United States, and it laid the groundwork for her artistic vision. She always knew she wanted to be an artist even when she was young, and there were very few African American women who were practicing artists, and art museums in the South at that time were closed to African Americans, so she actually was not allowed to go into the museums. She, after graduating from high school, she went to Howard University. She earned a bachelor's of science in art. She taught 2 years in North Carolina, and then she participated with Thurgood Marshall before he became a Supreme Court justice as an effort to gain equal pay for Black teachers, and that was not successful. She returned to graduate school for a master's degree at the University of Iowa, which you'd think is a really odd choice for somebody who went to Howard and was from the East Coast, but she went there for a particular reason, and that was because Grant Wood taught there. And Grant Wood, as we know, is the American Gothic, artist who did American Gothic. He became her mentor, but she moved away from painting to sculpture because he said that for her to take a subject that she knew best, to do a subject that she knew best, and it was sculpture, and it was the story of her people. And she dedicated herself to making art primarily for African American and later Mexican audiences, and she wanted to give that enduring dignity and strength and achievements of Black women to the other oppressed people. Now, I mentioned Mexico because Catlett moved to Mexico after the Second World War because of the practices that were done towards African American people at that time. She lived there for 6 decades. She married and raised her family there, but she also became a Mexican citizen. But her heart, she said, was always back in the United States. So let's go to the next one, the last slide, and you're going to recognize this piece. There she is. This is the statue of Sojourner Truth, and it's a favorite Catlett subject. It projects this. You look at it; it's this powerful physique and forceful character of the nearly 6 foot tall abolitionist. Sojourner Truth was almost 6 feet tall. It's the defiance and strength and determination. You know, just look at that pose, the uplifted head and the crossed arms, the planted feet. You know, she was Sojourner Truth was a gifted orator, and she achieved actually profound moral victories by just the force of her own personality. You know, even today, Truth's 1851 address of "Ain't I a Woman" inspires audiences. So some of you might recognize this statue. It once stood in downtown the Convention Center in Sacramento, the sculpture garden there. It was vandalized in 2012, and it was broken. The head was broken off. It was basically tipped off the pedestal. It broke into, I think, 3 or 4 pieces, plus a lot of other issues. It was actually restored, and now it resides inside the Crocker. And because it's basically too fragile to go back outside. But it is a magnificent piece, and it is about 7.5 feet tall. So when you stand next to it, you feel humbled. Now, I added the detail of the sharecropper print to the right because it continues to show Catlett's portrayal of the strength and determination of women. She did a lot of block prints, and and you can see it has the same planes and the very geometric lines and the proud uprising head. And she was asked why the image of the sharecropper featured predominantly her work, and a lot of it her work did. And she said that she described the farm near her grandmother's house in North Carolina where she spent summers, and she said, I met these people and played with their children, and they left a big impression on me. Speaking of the sharecroppers, she also recalled how the owner of the land would run his hounds through the fully grown corn and cotton, ruining their crops. They had no respect for anything. And she said that really made a big impression on her. And it was also one of the reasons that she left the United States and went to live in Mexico. And the final thing was when she was asked why she became a Mexican citizen, she said, in Mexico, I was just a woman. I didn't have to be a Black woman. And today she is recognized as an important American artist of the last century. And she produced politically charged and compelling graphic and sculptural images. And I will leave it with Sojourner Truth. And if there's any other questions or comments before we move to our meditation. This was a very, very quick of a few of the artists, very quick going through a few of the artists that the Crocker has, and ones that are kind of particularly my favorite.
So Suzanne, she did do the Sojourner Truth in 1999?
Yes, she did.
It was 84 when she did that then.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? 84.
It was one of the last pieces she did before she died. Most of these artists worked right up until they died. They were working the whole time.
Oh, she lived till 90. Didn't she live till like 97?
97, yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't think she did much sculpture after that. This was, I think, one of her last sculpture pieces.
Amazing, just amazing.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece, and it was stunning in the sculpture garden, and it's to me, it's not quite as stunning in the Crocker because it's not in a place to me of, I think, should be prominence, but it's still very electric. When you go stand next to it, it's a very electric piece.
Mm.
Any questions or comments or thoughts or?
It's just wonderful.
It was.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Claudia.
Okay, well, Claudia, we're just gonna do a breathing to kind of bring us down, bring us home, Claudia.
Well, why don't you go ahead and gaze at this picture in two worlds as you inhale and exhale. I bet you felt like this today.
Beautiful.
Kind of pulled in different directions. Maybe a lot on your plate. As women, that's what we do, isn't it? We're someone's shoulder. We hear worries of others. We worry for others, for the health and well-being of our loved ones. So take right now a moment for yourself. Breathing in peace, exhaling joy. Breathing in love, exhaling joy. Knowing who you are. You're strong. You're vibrant. You're like these women artists. You are more than what anyone ever expected you to be. You met every challenge that anyone ever threw at you. You're a strong, capable, amazing person filled with love, filled with strength, and capable of so many things. Frida Kahlo said, "At the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can." I'm sure that's your story. You achieved much more than anyone ever thought possible for you. So bringing yourself back. Namaste, my friends. Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
As we come back
yeah.
together, thank you so much, Susanne.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
always my pleasure.
you, Susanne.
Thanks for indulging my, addiction.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure to enjoy
There
your
you go.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you
where we
so
go.
much.
Well, I hope those who are in Sacramento, I hope that you'll be able to jump on and go to the, when the Crocker's opening. So we're going to go, and if, give me a buzz or email me and I'll meet you there and we'll tour ourselves. As Pam and I, there's some new pieces hanging and I'm looking forward to seeing them. A couple of new shows that have opened, so I'm looking forward to seeing those. Kind of like going home a little bit, huh, Pam?
That's right.
Yeah.
If
So
you're a member, you can get a reservation as of, I think, the 1st.
That's right. There's a special 2-day special opening for members. And then general public is April 8th.
yeah. So
Well,
hopefully
we are so blessed that we have 3 Crocker docents on tonight.
Mhm.
And I also want to acknowledge all 3 of you ladies, because the passion and the commitment that you have for doing this volunteer work, it's like, as I said about Susanne, it's like a master's degree in art or something,
I'm
the
learning.
amount of time,
It feels like.
the amount of time that you do preparing, and you're really the unsung heroes of the Crocker, in my opinion.
Thanks. Well, I think, as you said, we get more out of it, I think, because we just, it's something that I didn't know was missing. It was something that speaks to me and I didn't know it was missing. So it's kind of nice that I'm being fulfilled by that. But Marlene and Maria from Seattle. Gosh, Marlene, it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in over a year.
I just finally recognized Claudia and Pam. I'm so sorry I didn't say anything before.
For those who don't know,
thank you for the invitation.
Marlene is my sister-in-law, Randy's sister, and his favorite sister.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Maria, thank you for joining us, and is wonderful that you took the time, and all of you. It's great, and you too. Let's see, Diane from Fresno.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for Fresno. This is
Yeah,
my
there we
first
go.
time and it was lovely.
Great. Well, we'll do this again next month. I'm not sure. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?
April.
April. What
So
shall we do?
Claudia, this is Pam, and I want to thank you also for that. Even though it was brief, it was a beautiful meditation.
Yeah, it was. Yes, it was.
Well, I don't want to keep
You've endured a lot.
Thank you. Well, we know who we are, right?
Yeah.
We know who we are. We're the women who shoulder the world.
All right, ladies. Well, I'll let you go so you can finish your cocktails.
Thank you.
They're all gone, maybe.
Okay,
There we go.
Bye. Bye.
All right, take
Bye.
it easy.